Here it is, the NFL Strategy Show, kicking off Week 13 with Sal Vetri and myself, Dave Lochran, and our sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, home of that $200,000 NFL baller, 25K NBA baller, and you know it, the Turkey Trot, $75,000 Turkey Trot. What's great about this, you ask? Well, I'm glad you did. $25,000 in overlay. That's right, $75,000 contest, $25,000 in overlay. Phenomenal stuff. Now, they've also got the turkey ball. Did the turkey trot fill already? That can't be the case, Sal. Can it?
Yeah, I think it did. I think they entered or they created at least if I'm looking at it right too, a second contest that's like the exact same structure though. Like they're adding 50% extra to the pool.
Wow. And that's the turkey baller?
Yeah, and that's like almost filled too. I think there's only like 100 spots left.
That's crazy. Wow.
They're
I
gonna
mean,
open another one. They're gonna have to.
they're going to have to open another one. That's outrageous. Well, that's what happens when you have really good contests that, cater to the players. Still a lot of great ones, though, over there at Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. And you can head over there and get $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points when you do. Just sign up through us at awesomeo.com. Go to awesomeo.com, click on the NFL tab and articles. You'll see here's the easiest way to do it. You'll see last night's article, the primetime NFL article. Click on that from EMAC. It's free. And scroll down a tiny bit, you'll see the Yahoo link. Click that. And when you sign up, use the sign up code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, and get up to $30 in YSRPs when you deposit. So, yeah, get them and then jump into some of these contests before they fill. Pretty incredible that we're seeing them fill this quickly, but it makes sense because, there's a ridiculous advantage to anyone that jumps into I'm seeing the $11, $28,000 the turkey baller. What are you seeing in the lobby? Maybe the lobby's messed up because I don't see one that's almost filled.
Yeah, no, I updated on my end. That was the original one I looked at this morning had like 100 left, but that's the one that filled. And now I just see the turkey baller at the 5K to first, 12.2% rake.
That's crazy that they filled it by Tuesday morning now.
Yeah,
Pretty
insane.
incredible. Hopefully you guys got in there, and hopefully you sign up through us at awesomeo.com. Again, use the showdown link. It's free. Sign up and use Awesomeo when you do. Get your $30 in YSRPs. Anyway, here's what we're going to do today, Sal. We've got the Thanksgiving slate coming up, and we've got a normal main slate on Sunday. So what I'd like to do is just spend a little time not breaking down all the top plays, but just a bit of strategy for this Thanksgiving slate. A lot of people aren't going to have time to digest content or check out any content on Wednesday, Thursday night. They might be traveling. They might be with family. So here's a good time just for us to break down a little bit of this. And the reason being, we have one game that is just going to be absolute mega chalk. So here we have it. Thanksgiving Day, Chicago at Detroit, 12:30. Buffalo at Dallas, 4:30. New Orleans at Atlanta, 8:20. You know that game is going to be ridiculously popular. The majority of ownership everywhere is going to come in on that. And look, for good reason. There are a lot of fantastic plays here. I don't know what we're going to get out of Marshawn Lattimore if he plays or not, but that's another huge piece of the puzzle here. How are we going to approach this from a strategy standpoint? And should we be looking at, say, Anthony Miller's and like even a Bo Scarborough, guys that are going to be lower owned? Maybe Miller won't be, but lower owned guys to get away from that chalk, because I get that it's going to be a popular game for good reason, but also you've got to do something different on these slates if you want to stand out and if you want to win.
Yeah, you got to do something different. Just looking at it on a high level, at least, like quarterback position is, by far that late game has the two best options. The second game where you have nice quarterbacks at a cheaper tag, Dak's only 5,700, but Buffalo right now ranks as a top 5 secondary. Tre'Davious White has been fantastic. Josh Allen 6,200. Dallas also ranks as a top 8 secondary. So it's tough matchups for both of those guys, but without question, the price tag on Dak of 5,700 is really attractive. Even if you think Tre'Davious White, similar to what you saw out of Gilmore last year, having his way with Amari Cooper. Cooper may be more banged up. There's still other options on this team. Gallup will have a nice matchup. You'll have Jason Witten, of course, if you want to punt tight end. So I think strategy-wise, you're going to get all the ownership on Breeze and Ryan, and they'll probably be my highest owned quarterbacks. But Dak Prescott at 5,700, at least for the quarterback position, hard to ignore. Running back, yeah, I want to see what happens with Scarborough. I want to see if on a short week people react quick enough to him sort of being the guy out there. But it's going to depend on ownership. If he's not owned, then yeah, he's a $4,700 running back. We should see 15 plus touches. But if he becomes chalky because he is cheap and people see the recent spike in his touches the last 2 weeks, it's just sort of an easier kind of getaway spot or fade for me. Mainly because he's not going to get any passing game work. He has two other guys on his team, and J.D. McKissick and Ty Johnson, who will catch the ball. And what you're seeing out of Scarborough is if he doesn't get in the end zone, last week he had 8.8 points, even on 18 carries in a nice day. He's just not going to be needed more times than not. That being said, he was in the Millie Maker winning lineup because there's no value, but more times than not at 4,700. If he's a chalky piece this week and people react to that, I'll probably end up getting away for guys like Tariq Cohen, who I think have similar or more upside in a passing game role. So, yeah, I think that late game, you kind of look at the slate, or at least I do, and I see the four studs, Zeke, Kamara, Julio, and Thomas. People will probably try and get three of them into your lineups. It's just a matter of how do you prioritize those guys? And I think the one that probably falls off the most for me, at least right now, would be Kamara.
Interesting. That game opened with a 50-point over under, 48.5 now. Buffalo, Dallas at 44.5, now up to 55.5, and Chicago and Detroit has stayed at 38.5. That game should see the least amount of enthusiasm. But I do think Dallas and Buffalo is an interesting one because, do we go towards a Michael Gallup, assuming that Tre'Davious White is going to be giving Amari Cooper some issues here? I know that Amari Cooper actually left last week's game and returned, but he had Stephon Gilmore. He was held scoreless or without a reception on 2 targets. That's a surprise, but it's not a surprise that he was limited. And that Michael Gallup was at least more efficient and Randall Cobb was at least more efficient than both. What do you think about the coverage here and how it plays into how we approach guys like Gallup and Cooper, knowing that Tre'Davious White has been very good this season? I know Cooper can beat difficult coverage, but this might be a spot where you don't need to. And Buffalo's run defense has struggled against good running backs. Maybe Zeke comes into play here, as you mentioned, one of the top 4 studs.
Yeah, so if you're trying to get away from it strategy-wise, I think Dallas, the stack there and just getting a lot of players from that team makes a lot of sense. I think just priority-wise on Dallas, I would rank it Zeke, Gallup, and then Amari and Jason Witten. So stacking Zeke and Gallup, if you want to go Gallup and Jason Witten, I think that's a really nice stack that'll end up being lower owned. In past years, we've seen the same thing. Last year, Atlanta and New Orleans was a very chalky game, and we imagine that happens again. So, yeah, I think that's a priority where I go. I think Wallace, the number 2 cornerback for Buffalo, will be on Gallup. That's a fine matchup, a positive matchup for Gallup. I'd say that Tre'Davious White's been a top 3 cornerback this year. Definitely a brutal matchup for Amari Cooper. And he's just been banged up as of late. Like, I don't think if you get Amari from week 2 or 3, I don't think he gets goose egged last week on 80% of the snaps. He's just been dealing with a bum ankle and a bum knee. So, yeah, you can take your risks on him. You saw him light up the slate last year. He's only 6K. But I think I prefer Gallup there. And I really like this Dallas stack the more that we talk about it here. I think Zeke is going to be under-owned relative to the Alvin Kamaras of the world and some of the high-end wide receivers. And then you get some nice matchups for Wallace, Jason Witten if you're trying to punt the tight end position. So Dallas would probably be the biggest stand that I take on this slate. Going to be a third highest owned stack, but maybe it'll be a little bit more flat towards the top end.
Yeah, and it has this team has a second highest implied total too. You're going to see a lot of Matt Ryan stacks, but let's not confuse ourselves. The Cowboys have a 6-point higher implied total on this slate. So I personally think they should be the second highest owned stack for a number of reasons. That's not going to be the case though. So I think you're right. That's one spot to get a little bit different here. And then just one more question. We'll move on to the main slate. When you look at guys like Singletary, he and Frank Gore combined for, was it, I think 36 carries last game. They commanded the ball. They really kept it out of Denver's hands. Brandon Allen is bad, and so is that entire offense. So they were able to just bludgeon them to death on the ground. So there's guys like Devin Singletary. And then coming into the Chicago-Detroit game, is there anything you like here? Like, is Anthony Miller a guy that you say, and we talked about him a little bit, but would he be a top value for you on this slate? 20 targets over his last 2 games. He's finally beginning to get more involved in this offense, which is pretty necessary in my opinion. Played 55% of snaps, down 30% from the week previous, but still saw 9 targets. And then with Detroit, I've said it a lot, Chicago just does not give up big chunk plays. and Matthew Stafford is unlikely to play. The Detroit team, to me, in terms of overall, like, is there anyone I like here, is probably the totally least appealing team of all 6 on this slate. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the least appealing, just starting with the Detroit side. I do think that Marvin Jones' price point, we'll see how they line up. There won't be any dominating shadows from these Chicago cornerbacks, Prince Amukamara, Kyle Fuller. They'll be all over the place, but I think Marvin Jones' $5,300 price tag is nice. Driscoll finally just looked terrible last week, but he continues to have upside on the ground. Doesn't help these receivers, but we've seen Marvin Jones now in 2 weeks have 16 targets with Driscoll. Seem to be the preferred target over Kenny Galladay through 2 weeks now. So yeah, I would say Jones is the one who stands out the most from this team. Scarborough a little bit as well. But overall, not much. I think that the best 3K wide receiver is Anthony Miller, like you touched on. We'll see where the ownership comes in. If it comes in low, then yeah, you can fit him in. It allows you to do a lot with your lineup, especially just because on this slate, you're going to have to pay down at tight end with Austin Hooper doubtful. So I think one of the bigger pieces for me is it's trying to find a stance on running back. I mentioned earlier, Alvin Kamara out of these top end guys might be one that doesn't make my lineup. I prefer Zeke over Kamara, just probably straight up this week. And then ownership, I would imagine, leans Kamara's way, but we'll know that probably by tomorrow. And then I'm going to be getting Michael Thomas into lineups on a 3-game slate. So looking at this Bears team, I think that they have value at running back. They'll probably both be lower owned because lately David Montgomery has been terrible, but still getting work. And Tariq Cohen has been being used more overall and in the passing game. So we've seen it in past years, Cohen have success on these primetime games on Thanksgiving. I don't really weight that too much, but I do like Cohen as a $5,000 running back where as long as he does something and allows you to unlock the Julios, the Michael Thomas, the Zeke type lineups with some stack and correlation, I like the upside that you get out of Cohen because even if he falls flat on his face, he can find his way into 5 catches for 40, 50 yards.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and hit on the main slate here. We got about 45 minutes to knock all this out. Should be plenty of time. The quarterback position, in my opinion at least, is pretty loaded. Now, you have you have Patrick Mahomes against Oakland. Aaron Rodgers coming off a dreadful performance against a exceedingly good San Francisco defense. He's 6,500. And then you've got guys like Kyler Murray and Winston in a similar price range. Lamar Jackson is incredible. Absolutely incredible. But I've got to tell you, Sal, I still will probably, as good as he's been, as high as his ceiling is, I still, right now at least, am favoring Patrick Mahomes over Lamar Jackson. I just have a lot of respect for San Francisco's defense. We haven't seen him cave yet this season. Could it happen this week? Sure. But Oakland is just a bad overall pass D. They're garbage on all fronts. Sam Darnold just lit them up last time out for 2 touchdowns and 315 yards on 20 for 29 passing. Like, it just feels like such a smash spot for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I prefer Mahomes over Jackson as well. I just don't know how these Baltimore, and I guess it doesn't have to happen if he just does it all on the ground like he has been for half of these games, but I just don't see how anything in the Baltimore receiving core or even Mark Andrews can get open and free on San Fran. Again, it's $7,000, so you can get to him if you'd like, but I do prefer Patrick Mahomes here. One of my preferred options on the slate is Mahomes and just paying all the way up for him in tournaments. I like that early on. In this 6K plus range, it's just a lot of guys in general. It's a loaded range where we don't have any bye weeks now for the first time in however many weeks, 8 weeks. So yeah, I think that Mahomes is a guy that stands out among the top. Aaron Rodgers against the Giants in a much easier matchup, the complete opposite of what he just had against San Fran. No pass rush for the Giants, really no secondary. I do like Rodgers in sort of a bounce back spot at 6,500. The concern is always with Rodgers is you're probably going to get Mahomes throwing 40 times in this game, 38 times. Rodgers, they very much so want to run the ball 30 plus times between Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. So the price point at 6,500, I think, is fine. I think in the 6K plus range, my priorities would be Patrick Mahomes and Rodgers, and then there's just sprinkles of the Jameses, Murray, Sam Darnold, even with the price tag coming up.
One of the problems I have with Rodgers, and I think he's a perfectly fine option. If you're looking to stack this game, you have Devontae Adams, and then who else? Geronimo Allison, MVS, Alan Lazard, Jake Kumara. Like, these guys are not viable really any week. Jimmy Graham hasn't seen more than 5 targets or more than 4 targets in 3 weeks. He's coming off a 2-target game. I know Jamal Williams saw 8 targets last time out, but that was garbage time playing with a huge deficit. That's the one issue I have with Aaron Rodgers is If you want to just pair him with Devontae Adams, I think that's more than reasonable. And if you feel like running it back with Barkley or something, sure. But it's hard to like full out game stack with Aaron Rodgers when there's literally no one outside of Adams that you can trust in the passing game.
Yeah, I would just do and recommend Devontae Adams, and he's really cheap. We'll get to wide receiver this week, but that's it. I mean, obviously liking to correlate for the biggest upside of winning the whole thing, team and game stacking. But if you're going to be getting to Rodgers, I think if you want to try and force that type of a stack in, yeah, your secondary options would be these running backs. Jamal Williams is only 4,500. Aaron Jones' price is still 6,800, so that's not attractive. And playing what is the lesser of the running backs in Jamal Williams snap count wise on the year does not seem all that attractive, although the passing game role is there. If he ends up with like 15 points in your lineup, you could win a Millie Maker or win something. But I think the best upside, if you're trying to take the Packers and look at it game by game and stack by stack, adding context into it, would just be a Devontae Adams 12 target, has his normal game with Aaron Rodgers in there, spreading the ball around to the other 6 guys who yet, for the most part, don't see any bulk on this team.
I want to spend some time below 6K, but I'll ask first. When we get to guys like Kyler Murray and Jameis Winston and Sam Darnold here, I guess we could throw Jared Goff into the mix, but I'm just really, I don't find myself needing to go there. He's been absolutely dreadful. He's had some tough matchups. There's no question. This one gets a little bit easier, and there are options like Kupp and Woods and Cooks that you can lean on, but he's been terrible. What are you thinking in this sub Aaron Rodgers range from like 6K to 6,400?
Yeah, I think it's just the guys who, like you said, we'll get to the 5K range where some players stand out. These guys just kind of, nothing stands out right now early in the week. I think the one that stands out the most would be Jameis, as he does every week. He's just going to throw 40 times. The team implied total of 23.5 is nice. I have it as being a above average for positive for the offense in terms of pace. You'll have Boye on a guy like Evans for part of the game. Godwin should have a nice matchup. So once again, it's just always Jameis, and then you pick between those two receivers, and it becomes a headache. So Murray stands out a little bit, but the concerns around stacking come into play where he just almost looks better just pairing with Kirk or running naked in that sort of a matchup. I think Jameis becomes the priority in the mid 6K range. And then, yeah, you touched on Goff. Once again, though, team total around 25, fastest paced game. They're going to keep having confidence in this offense, and it's a nice spot. I'll probably in tournaments where he has been abysmal. I mean, he faced Baltimore last week, brutal matchup in the secondary. He faces no pass rush, though, and he still looks really bad and looks timid in the pocket. But with the options that they have out there, another week healthier for Cooks and Woods having another whole week of practice for him, it's a spot where at 6K, I think it's worth taking a risk when those wide receivers are also at kind of season low price points.
Yeah, it's worth it knowing that there are options that you can get the ball to and you can put up huge numbers. Like if you saw, Robert Woods and Kupp both going for 25 plus fantasy points, you wouldn't be shocked. You're right, a high total. This offense has been dismal, but the matchups have been difficult. I think in tournaments, I'd be willing to sprinkle in a little bit of Jared Goff too. I don't think I'd go heavy on him, but I definitely have some interest. Now, do you have interest in guys like, well, I'll ask you very quickly, yes or no on Sam Darnold against Cincinnati?
I'm going to say no. I like it, and I think he's definitely viable, but just overall, I'm going to say no. And it's probably nothing really more so to do with him as to Crowder and Anderson being the primary targets and not really trying to go there.
Okay. Carson Wentz, literally probably coming off the 2 worst games of his career. People might look at Seattle and be like, oh, well, he 256, 33 for 45, 73% of his passes were completed. Well, he also fumbled 3 times, lost 2 of them, and threw 2 interceptions. It was brutal. His receivers are terrible. And Dan Orlovsky actually put a video out yesterday breaking some of this down. The receivers aren't even in the right spots. He's been given nothing. In the same breath, he missed Miles Sanders on an easy touchdown. Missed him again on what would have been like a 20-plus yard gain on a screen pass. Threw a couple into the feet of his receivers, killed a couple worms. I mean, Wentz was not good at all in a game that their defense kept them competitive. They've held the Patriots and Seahawks to a combined 34 points, and they've lost by a combined, 18 or something? Like it's not good. So now he gets what you would hope would be a respite from the difficult spots against Miami. They are big favorites on the road. He's got a bruised hand, isn't expected to miss any practice. Can you look to Carson Wentz here And if you do, who the hell outside of Ertz are you pairing him with?
Yeah, exactly. I look more towards the running game. It's crazy how bad that they've looked and this offense has looked. Defense is much
Terrible.
improved. And this is how bad Miami is, 9.5-point favorites and second highest team total of 27.5. So that's all attractive. But at this price point, I'd probably rather go down in price or I just go right to Jared Goff. It's probably nothing really to do with Wentz, but what you said, your top two pairing options are his two tight ends, Goddard and Ertz. And I really don't want to be doing that in tournaments. I think Ertz is going to be fine this week, but the price point is now up. It just lays itself out to be a spot where as long as Jordan Howard comes back this week, that's probably where most of my interest will be. If he's out again, then you have somewhat more flexibility with a Miles Sanders and a Goddard, or a Goddard and a Miles Sanders and a Ertz, but none of that seems as high upside, even given the matchup. So yeah, just no downfield threats really in this offense. Ertz last week getting a lot of it in garbage time. It's not a spot that I'll probably get to him, even though they're playing Miami.
Do you have any other interest in quarterbacks here? I will throw a couple names at you and just see where you're at before we talk RBs. Derek Carr against KC. Nick Foles against Tampa Bay here, 5,700. Ryan Fitzpatrick, much improved Philly defense though. Much improved recently. And then Andy Dalton is back at the helm starting over Ryan Finley. Zach Taylor said, yeah, we were just trying to evaluate him, and we've seen what we needed. Yeah, you did, pal. You saw more than you needed to see. Andy Dalton, 4,700 against the Jets. Of those four guys I just mentioned, not including Wentz, I think there are a couple that I'll probably have some of, maybe a lot of Nick Foles. As gross as it feels, DJ Chark and Westbrook could put up big numbers here. And it's a very interesting spot at a discounted price point.
Yeah, Foles is the guy I like the most. 25 implied team total, a decent pace here, and just the nice matchup against Tampa at 5,700. He didn't look great last week, but he still has the receivers that you would feel confident in kind of doing stacks with Shark, Conley, and Westbrook. There's some nice options there when it comes to groups and just getting different lineups. So Foles is the guy who stands at the most. Not too much interest in the Kyle Allens of the world. Derek Carr, he's a 9.5-point underdog, should be throwing only a 21 team total here. And the problem for me with Derek Carr is, Darren Waller stands out as a nice option. Tyrell Williams, though, case of the drops the last couple of weeks, but also you're getting 5 targets out of this guy a week. It's just really hard to see Derek Carr with the weapons he has winning a tournament as good as he can be in real life as of late. It doesn't really translate to huge tournament DFS winning scores. So Foles stands out. And Andy Dalton at 4,700, a really nice matchup, but there's just no confidence. You got Cordy Glenn back on the offensive line for the first game last week after some injuries and just suspensions. 19 implied team total is one of the lower ones on the slate. Not great overall, but I think that it at least props up guys like Boyd and Tate to be more at least serviceable and at least playable this week as opposed to Finley. The $4,700 price tag on Dalton stands out. I don't know if I get there in a tournament, but as gross as it sounds for like cash games, it's at least worth considering how much you can get to if you save $2,000 by going to Dalton and hope he has a 16, 17-point day.
Yeah, I like this sub 6K range, to be honest with you. Or even from Goff, because it's gross, but even Goff down, Mahomes stands out to me at the top. I could see myself, Sal, having a lot of Mahomes and then kind of foregoing most of that mid-range in the 6K and then coming down below the 6K range.
Yeah, right now I have listed as just like an early week on Tuesday, like 4 guys who are in like a sort of a priority, you can call it. I have Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Nick Foles as 4 guys above the rest. And then there's a group of like 6 quarterbacks after that. They're scattered around as guys to look more into.
All right. Talking running backs here as we go position by position here on the Strategy Show. By the way, NFL Strategy, that is the code that'll get you 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus. You'll see it in the top left. Promo code NFL Strategy. Go to awesemo.com/join. All right, scroll to the bottom. You'll see all of the video tutorials on all of our most popular and best tools. Before you do anything, before you dive in, you can check all of that out and even answer a question as what type of player are you? So we can cater the subscription to your needs. You're not getting too much or too little, and you're not paying too much or too little. Get exactly what you need when you sign up. Use that code NFL Strategy, all one word, 50% off your first month at awesemo.com. And when you do, head over to our premium Slack chat and say what's up. We'll show you around. Running back position, Sal. Christian McCaffrey, 10-5 against Washington. This guy just does it every week. It's absurd. It's out of control at this point. He's averaging 32.5 fantasy points per game. When you look at the numbers, the there's just like no way to describe what we're seeing from him. He's averaging 155 total yards, 154 yards from scrimmage per game. So we'll talk about Christian McCaffrey. And then similarly to the quarterback position, I really like some of the lower mid-range running backs. Whereas Chubb against Pittsburgh, do I have an issue with him? No. Were we right? He still got 20 plus carries, even though Kareem Hunt was involved. Yeah, we were, and he had a good game. Much more difficult matchup here, though, in Pittsburgh. Derrick Henry's price has come up. He's been stellar, but pretty one-dimensional. He's going to need to find the end zone a time or two. Leonard Fournette against Tampa. Going to be involved in the passing game, but certainly a tough matchup on the ground. Can Nick Foles exploit him through the air, and Leonard Fournette doesn't need to do as much? Let me just keep going here, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Saquon Barkley has looked nothing like he's been a shell of himself since returning from that high ankle sprain. Some difficult matchups for sure, but he has not looked like the same player with that explosiveness. No big plays. He did have a 22-yarder last game, but that's basically all we've seen from him outside of a late garbage time reception against Dallas in Week 9. And then you get down to Le'Veon Bell against Cincy. You get down to Josh Jacobs against a terrible KC run defense. Aaron Jones against the New York Giants. It starts to open up there. You can make a good argument for a lot of these guys in the 7K range, but I also think there's some warts there as well.
Yes, I agree. It's a week almost similar to last week. I think we might have a little bit more, depending on injuries, value opening up this week, but nothing that stands out. So you saw last week, Christian McCaffrey goes for 34. And it's something that I said before a lot of the shows on him compared to Michael Thomas. There's not a lot of guys who can outscore him or match him. And last week was like a very rare week where you had Leonard Fournette outscore him, Derrick Henry matched him, and Nick Chubb scores 28. So McCaffrey's just not needed at 34 at that price point. But more weeks than not, there's going to be the highest score behind, besides McCaffrey at running back, will score like 25, 24. And then you do need McCaffrey. So I think that at 10.5, his price point's still completely fine. He's still one of the guys who's on a short list of players that I'll try and prioritize at running back this week. And then, yeah, the rest of the 7K range, at least the top end, Chubb in this matchup, we've seen him have success in it before and success in difficult matchups, but he's not a priority for me. Derrick Henry, as the price point comes up, had a really nice matchup last week, a little bit tougher this week, definitely tougher than Jacksonville this week, but you get what you get out of Henry. 3 or 4 times a year, he'll go for 100 plus and a touchdown or two, and you can pick those spots. I just don't want to pick it at top dollar pricing when he's just very one-dimensional. Leonard Fournette, tough matchup. So I start to get interested in McCaffrey at the top end. And then when you're looking at the 7K range, I have a ton of interest in Le'Veon Bell. Continues to see 20-plus touches a week. Now he gets Cincy. Very favorable matchup. I'd project him for somewhere around 22 total touches. Receiving game role is strong and intact, it seems. And then Saquon, if the price is going to keep coming down to 7,400, it's not like he's losing snaps. It's not like they are shutting him down like they rumored, and we'll know about that before it happens. So 97% of the snaps last week. It's just 19.5 team total. Pretty bad. The Packers have been bad on the ground against versatile and just general running backs with versatile ones. So if Barkley's price keeps coming down, there's going to be a week where he just has, I mean, his floor used to be 18, 20 fantasy points. Surely he's not fully healthy, but that 7K plus range, I prioritize it as McCaffrey, Bell, and Barkley as of right now.
Yeah. I really like Josh Jacobs at 6,900. I really like Le'Veon Bell. I think this could be a spot for Saquon Barkley. I'm definitely worried, but it could be one of these blow-up spots for him. We know that if there's been one weakness on this Green Bay defense, it's certainly been on the ground. So all of that stands out to me right now early on with this preliminary look. Giants not exactly a high implied total, but they're only 6-point dogs. What are you going to do? You mentioned, though, a lot of these spots are difficult, and not just that. If you're paying a premium on certain players, like, for example, Tennessee being a road dog, 2.5-point road dog, this game could stay very close, but you're paying a lot for Derrick Henry, and you find yourself in similar positions with a lot of these guys. I know the Browns are 1-point favorites, but I still have a ton of respect for this defense in Pittsburgh. It's truly the only reason that they've stayed competitive at all this season. Their offense has not answered the bell in any sense. But what about two guys that I just mentioned? Josh Jacobs against Kansas City. This Kansas City run defense has been hammered on the ground all season long. They are a bottom 2 run defense according to Football Outsiders. They have been, again, all season long. Run defense on Pro Football Focus has them dead last with a 55 grade. Really, really bad here. And from a coverage standpoint, they haven't been spectacular by any means, but teams have really exploited them on the ground. And I think the only way Oakland stays competitive here, if they can, is by doing what teams like the Colts have done and just trying to eat up clock with the ground game. And you have a very good running back in Josh Jacobs. So thoughts on him and thoughts on Aaron Jones. Do you think he gets more of a workload in a game where they're, touchdown favorites on the road, unlike last week where they got just wiped out by the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, so I think the comparison you make with the Colts and Mac is exactly how Oakland should go about this game, and really how they've been trying to go about most of their games, is having Derek Carr just be serviceable to good when it matters and have Jacobs control it. My only concern is just the 9.5-point underdog, even in a very fantastic matchup at a high price point. So we saw Jacobs being extremely chalky like week 2 when he was just 4K or 4,500 in this matchup as a 9.5-point underdog, just like now. And he can catch a ball or two in a game, but he's very much dependent on the touchdowns and the 100-yard bonus. So in this spot at that price tag, it's just going to be really tough for me to get there. That's probably one spot where I'll go against you, is just Jacobs this week, probably not as much of a priority as the underdog for me. And I just $300 more, I'd probably take Bell or just go down in this range. The guys we'll talk about. Aaron Jones, there's a big concern here for me, is 1 target the last 2 weeks, 4 targets since Devontae Adams returned. And look, they needed him when there was no Adams. He was their number 1 receiver. It's just very odd to see the entire offense go away from that. And they've had struggles since then getting the ball to anybody else in this team besides Adams, because, they're just a bunch of really bad wide receivers. So I'd imagine they have to start scheming him back in, or you would think that's a logical thing to do. But just looking at a 3-week sample, he's not involved in the passing game anymore. And that's where all the upside was. You can't pay $6,800 if Aaron Jones is going to split 25 to 28 carries a game with Jamal Williams in the backfield. It's just a ridiculous price tag. So yeah, both of those guys I'm not so much there on. And it's probably more so because of Bell interest there. But then also Todd Gurley at 6,500 is probably where I'd go more if I'm going to go to the 6K range. Stands out as my favorite guy currently in the 6K range. Just played 96% of the snaps last night, 75 plus the last 3 weeks, has been sneaky efficient and effective, but also just staying on the field and playing huge snaps. It seems like the injury concerns are at least not there over the last month.
Okay. Yeah, for me, Jacobs and Aaron Jones are just, it's assuming they go over. Look, these are 2 tournament plays that I like. 10-point dogs on the road, but this turns into a game that's even semi-competitive. Josh Jacobs is going to be the reason why. And Aaron Jones, just while he hasn't been targeted much through the air, what I do like about him is we have already seen, 3 games this year with multiple touchdowns. 4 games this season with multiple touchdowns. If you include the game where he had 2 rushing touchdowns, he had 2 receiving touchdowns. He had 3 rushing touchdowns against Carolina, 2 receiving against Kansas City, 4 rushing against Dallas, 2 rushing against Denver. So what stands out is he gets all of the goal line work. And in a game where Green Bay is favored by a lot and has a 25.5-point total, I feel like you could see him fall into the end zone a couple times. And if he gets going, you could see a big game. So depending on ownership, if these 2 guys are low owned, I'm going to be there just because I know their ceiling is huge in spots like this. What about below them? Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Jonathan Williams. Do you have any interest in these guys, let's say all the way from 5K up to the Aaron Jones range right below it?
Yeah, honestly, the 5K range is pretty gross this week. And we saw this last week where the 5 until you get to the low 5K range, there really wasn't much identifiable value. So top of the 5K range, Joe Mixon stands out, but a really difficult matchup. Not a priority, more of a secondary interest. Has been a little bit better as of late with volume, but still one of the worst running backs in the league in fantasy point per touch at 0.658. That's less than half of guys like McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler. He just has not been good efficiency-wise. The rest of his 5K range, Jonathan Williams stands out. We'll see what happens with Jordan Wilkins, though. I imagine the reason he just doesn't touch the ball last week is mainly because of health on the short week where he was injured. If Wilkins just sees 10 carries, it's probably a spot in this, or even 8. It's probably a spot where Jonathan Williams' overall workload comes down to around the 15 carry range. And against Tennessee, it's not great. Yeah, 5K range is pretty gross, but I think the one priority for me, as it kind of was last week, and everything worked out, it's just the offense had Brandon Allen throwing the ball, is Philip Lindsay at $5,000. You saw now last week the snaps came back up to being balanced, but 2 weeks ago, they talked about just getting more snaps and being the number 1 running back in this offense, Philip Lindsay, and having more of a spread touch-wise. You saw 2 weeks ago, 18 to 9 touches. He outsnapped or outtouched Royce Freeman by 9, double. And then last week, you saw Philip Lindsay have 13 carries to Royce Freeman's 2. So there is something going on here very under the radar that Philip Lindsay is being the number one running back on this team after they said it, and it's been shown for 2 weeks now. The issue is we hope, honestly, if you're playing fantasy, that Drew Lock starts for Denver because Brandon Allen, 82 passing yards, 9 passing yards in the second half for Denver, 9. So that's not going to help your offense. Lindsay at 5K is the thing that stands out the most in that range for me.
It's crazy. I was pretty high on Lindsay last week for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. That he finally outsnapped Royce Freeman, outtouched him by double, and then this week the snap counts, I think they were even, right? But the touch counts were in Lindsay's favor in a big way. That was kind of weird to me that Lindsay saw 16 total looks, right? Which is good. They were playing from behind. It was hideous. 16 total looks. Royce Freeman saw 4, but I'm pretty sure. Let me just make sure of this. I thought their snap counts were like 56 to 54%, which I don't know. It's weird. It doesn't even make sense that would be the case. Yeah, 56 Freeman to 54 Philip Lindsay. The only thing I can think of is, do they just trust Freeman more in pass protection?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think they trust him more in pass protection. I think it's a 1-game sample, so like the 13-2 rush attempts is probably a little bit more skewed than it should be. Maybe it should be closer to like an 11-4 or something. But I do think there's something to Lindsay just being schemed into the offense a little bit more. It's just tough to trust it. Like if Brandon Allen is named the starter for this week again, it's really tough to trust what you saw last week. He looked serviceable the first 2 weeks, and that's using it very loosely, but last week he just couldn't move anything. And if you're going to have stalled drives for a running back that is going to rely on volume on the ground, then yeah, it's concerning. But that 5K range seems pretty bare right now. He stands out the most at the exact 5K price point.
So Doug Peterson already said that if Jordan Howard practices in the early week, it'll be in a limited capacity. I'm under the impression that what's the point of even playing him against Miami if you're trying to heal him up? So right now I'm going to go ahead and say he doesn't play. So Miles Sanders to me is someone that I'm still interested in. I think they'll try to get the run game going early, and often. I don't know why you wouldn't. I think it'd be silly if you didn't. So I do like Miles Sanders here. Plus this range is ugly anyway. We can talk receivers and maybe find some good value there. But below 5K, do you like anything here? The only guy that really stood out to me a little bit was Benny Snell. And I don't think based on James Conner's own words, it seems that there's a chance, but it doesn't seem like a probability that James Conner plays. Benny Snell was clearly the go-to guy here. It seems like they're souring a bit on old Jalen Samuels, who played 30% of snaps. Benny Snell played 49%, and Trey Edmonds played 16%. But the big thing here is Jalen Samuels saw 2 carries, and for someone that had been featured in the passing game, saw only 3 targets in a very good matchup against Cincinnati, while Benny Snell only had 1 target but also carried the ball 21 times. What are your thoughts here on the sub 5K range?
Yeah, Benny Snell stands out. Howard, like you mentioned, if Howard was to play this week, he would stand out. And then Jamal Williams. I think Benny Snell stands out the most. And it's interesting to see what happens here. So that game was close. I mean, they only win by 6 points. It wasn't like it was a blowout and they just let Snell run the ball and Samuels did nothing. Like Samuels has been bad as an actual running back, aside from just being a really good receiving back, a former tight end, but only averaging like 2.5 yards per carry this season and in his career. So yeah, Snell getting the work was a little bit odd, I guess you can say, but not shocking. So 21 carries, 98 yards. The concern here is that there's really no value this week. We've seen it in past weeks with the Brian Hills of the world at similar price point. If there's no value, people are just going to try and jam in value at running back. And if Benny Snell starts to become 20, 30% owned, it's really not a spot that I have to get to. We have not seen a passing game role from him in any of the preseason or since he's kind of played in the regular season. If he was to get a similar role of 20 carries, it's a fine matchup. But you're really banking on touchdowns at that point. So if he's low owned, I think he's fine. On cash games, I think he's fine. But we'll see what the ownership looks like. He seems like a Brian Hill type of a play if he starts to become like 30% owned.
I hear you, for sure. Any other value at running back?
No, that's it. Jamal Williams, like I said, priced down at 4,500, does stand out for a guy who probably sees 12 to 15 touches and a couple of catches, but it's nothing of priority.
All right, talk to me about Tyreek Hill. Just out of the gate against Oakland, one of the highest upside players in the league. coming off a 19 target game and then a 2 target game where he was injured. That almost knocked me out of my guillotine league. Ended up pulling through late in that one, but damn it, Tyreek Hill. He should be perfectly fine about it for this one. They said a lot of it was precautionary holding him out in week 11. They're coming off a bye week. I'm assuming he plays. And if that's the case, generally don't like paying this much for receivers, but man, it's hard to not have interest in Tyreek Hill in this ridiculously appealing matchup.
Yeah, definitely don't like paying this much for receivers relative to what the slate looks like. And I think there's a lot of 6 and 7K receivers that stand out. But overall in the slate, you're trying to find value, so it makes it a little bit tougher to prioritize Hill. The game against Tennessee, where he had 19 targets, that is still, to this day for the season, the best game that I've watched a wide receiver play that I've at least watched.
No question.
If somebody just wants to go and look up like every single one of his catches, it's not only like the deep plays and him being fine on those. He was like literally a pinball. It would be 1 or 2 defenders, they couldn't tackle him. He would gain 15 yards after the catch.
And let me just interject for 1 second. The Eagles have a 27-point implied total, and then it falls down to the Packers at 25.5. Okay, for this slate, Kansas City's at 30.5 right now, so just head and shoulders above every other team.
Yeah, I think Hill is fine if you want to play him at 8,900. Again, like I'll voice the Michael Thomas concerns is just there's a lot of opportunity cost at wide receiver when there's guys 2K less than him that I think have a logistic shot and probably a very realistic shot at outscoring him this week, and guys like the Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupps of the world. So he's not a priority for me at that price tag. If it was like $900 less, then yes, but it's just priced to a point where even if he scores 25 points, I don't think he's needed. He can surely help you in a tournament, but he's not guaranteeing you're not missing out on it. So he's not a priority. He's a secondary option, but yeah, probably the highest ceiling on the overall slate right there with McCaffrey. At 8,900, it's kind of borderline to where I would start to prioritize it, but I'm just probably not going to get as much. Nice matchup, but I just prefer the cheaper guys.
Yeah, one thing I see a little differently than you with Tyreek Hill comparing him to a Michael Thomas is no matter how Michael Thomas is spectacular, but Tyreek Hill's the type of guy that could have like 2 70-yard touchdowns in a game. Yeah. And the ceiling is astronomical. So here's the way I see it. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyreek Hill does come in under-owned because of how expensive he is. And if Tyreek Hill's coming in around like 9 or 10%, I just don't see any way I'm not doubling the field there. I don't know how I can't if he's going to be that low owned. But we can talk about some of the mid-range guys, and you can make a case for them. You got Evans against Jacksonville, Devontae Adams against the Giants. We have talked about Janoris Jenkins playing much better lately. Cooper Kupp against Arizona. Man, what a fall from grace for this fella, huh? I mean, he's coming off a 0 reception game, then a 3 for 53, 6 for 35. To be fair now, difficult matchups, but Jared Goff has not been able to get him the ball. Can we see things turn around here for Cooper Kupp, who, by the way, you would think that DraftKings, who preemptively price guys and price them based on, former performance, that he would be cheaper than this, like based on how he's played or how Goff has played and subsequently affected him. But Cooper Kupp's the 3rd highest priced receiver on this slate.
Yeah, that's a little bit concerning. Like, he's not a priority for me on this slate, although the matchup against Arizona is fantastic. I'll have a good amount. Just some other guys in the 6K and Adams I prefer a little bit more. I haven't done the due diligence to see if like the separation for him as of 3 weeks ago was fine. So I imagine it's still okay. I think it's just more so, yeah, like they haven't had Cooks. They haven't had Woods last week and limited this past week. You had Woods only playing 67% of snaps. So easier to prioritize taking away Kupp. Tougher matchups. And yeah, Goff has been terrible. So all those things account. If you're playing Goff and you're going to have some of him, you're definitely going to have Kupp. So I have interest there, not as much in one-off spots as some of these other receivers. But he definitely is, I would say, appropriately priced, even though, yeah, he's been bad. I think appropriately priced for the matchup. But Adams, yeah, 7K. Jenkins has been fine. Adams will move into the slot. They'll move him around. And honestly, even if Jenkins was to shadow him 100%, 7K for Devontae Adams in this matchup is probably the best priced wide receiver for me on the board. I think it's just way too cheap. We saw him at 6,900 2 weeks ago, has like an average game for Devontae Adams, 7 catch, 120-yard performance. So Adams is a guy who I'll be trying to prioritize. He'll probably be a reason why I have more Aaron Rodgers, just because of how cheap he is. This is a guy who has a true ceiling in the 30-plus range and can get there rather easily against the Giants. You probably see 12 to 13 targets from him, 3 or 4 red zone targets. I think Adams at 7K is right there as a 1 or 2. We'll talk about the second guy in a second, wide receiver playing the slate.
I love Devontae Adams here, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely love Devontae Adams. I love Tyreek Hill. I get your concerns there. I certainly do. And to be fair, I haven't made lineups yet. So things could change, right? Like he might get squeezed out of my lineups. It's possible. But I just see it as a monster upside spot. I also find DJ Moore very appealing. We've talked about how good he's been without getting in the end zone. He scores 2 touchdowns and drops 34 fantasy points. That was the type of game you were waiting for. Marshawn Lattimore was out. You look at the target counts for this guy over his last, 7, 8, 10, 9, 10, 11, 15, 9. He's getting peppered with targets from Kyle Allen. And I think this is actually a reasonable price point on a blossoming young, soon to be elite receiver in Carolina. How about DJ Shark against Tampa Bay? 6,600 to me. If you're going to be pricing, if you're going to be pricing Cooper Kupp at 71, you're going to be pricing DJ Moore at 68, which is very reasonable. But more so, you're going to be pricing Beckham at 67 against Pittsburgh. I think DJ Shark should cost more than this.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the guy who I think's right there with Adams as the two best wide receiver plays based on price right now early in the week. Just looking at it, to me, yeah, Shark at 6,600 against Tampa. I just don't know who covers him out there. Like Carlton Davis probably isn't going to stay on him that much. Shark moves into the slot 30% of the time, which is an even better matchup for him in there. So yeah, I would imagine Shark sees a healthy 8 to 10 targets in this one and has all day to do really whatever he wants. The team total of 25 is encouraging. And right now you have Tampa Bay just giving up the most points to wide receivers on the season. Yeah, Shark at 6,600. The price point hasn't moved for 2 weeks now in which he's performed fine. So yeah, I think that he's a priority for this slate. He makes getting to Nick Foles at a cheap quarterback price tag very attractive because you get a stable stack in a really good spot and it doesn't cost you all that much.
What are you doing though with, and by the way, I think outside of Tyreek Hill, we're on the same page with most of these guys above like 6K right now. What are you doing with Godwin and Evans? Evans below 7K against Jacksonville. Godwin 7,700, which is kind of bizarre, right? Because Godwin had a bunch of ugly games too, and then one monster performance shot his price tag up. They're going up against Jacksonville. Not the same defense that we've seen in the past, but still decent. They've got I think a 24-point total here. Yeah, Jacksonville 1-point favorites at home. 49 over under in this game too, Sal, which was a bit surprising to me. Higher than I thought it would be. So do you like this game as a contrarian game? We don't have ownership, but I think contrarian would be stacking Winston with his pass catchers. Chalk, I think, is probably going to be Foles with his pass catchers, just to point that out before we actually get ownership.
Yeah, I think this is a really good spot. Both sides of it have stacking options. We talked about the DJ Shark side with Nick Foles, and then you can keep going back to the Jameis side and their receivers. I think the one who stands out would be Mike Evans just because of the price discount. Like these guys saw equal opportunities in terms of volume and similar air yards last year. It just happened to be that Godwin catches the red zone touchdown that was just an insane grab, one-handed, just bats it into his own hand. And then the long one, he splits the defenders, gets a touchdown. So, yeah, they continue to just go off in weeks and small sample size of like 10 games. He played 100 or 1,000 of these games. I think you would see a lot of games in there, 2 or 3 a year, where you get both of them scoring 20-plus points. So, yeah, I think that Evans, he'll have the tougher matchup. Boye this season has shadowed Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins did fine against Boye, as you would imagine. Michael Thomas was actually limited, but not all that much just for Michael Thomas's standards. So I think Evans now getting into the 7K range with a significant difference in price of 800. I would prefer Evans there in a spot that I think is more favorable just in general on the outside for the way that Winston and this offense has played for probably the last 2 months. So yeah, I think Evans stands out, but neither of them are as much of a priority as the DJ Sharks and Devontae Adams that we talked about earlier.
I'm with you. I do think though, as far as ownership is concerned, if we get ownership and, Foles and Shark and Westbrook are mega chalk, I still have interest, of course. And then the Winston Tampa stack isn't, even though we're going super heavy on Jacksonville and ignoring a team that throws the ball 40 times a game. That to me will probably be enough to push these guys over the top for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the other thing is, like last week, you had Ridley at a steep price point of 6,500 for his standards, and then Julio as a 8K player. This week, you could have a favorable price on Shark. And if you wanted to go 5-man stack to kind of relieve some of the pricing of Godwin being 77 and Evans 69, you have D.D. Westbrook cheap. You have Chris Conley in the 4K range. So it makes it very easy to stack this side, whichever side that you actually do, because of the price discounts on Jacksonville.
Anything below 6K that you like here? If you want to talk T.Y. Hilton, by the way, that works too. You get into the area of like Devontae Parker, Christian Kirk, Jamison Crowder, Tyler Boyd, Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, D.D. Westbrook. I don't even think we need to spend much time on him at 5K versus Tampa. But there you have a lot of guys in that 5K up to 6K range that we can discuss here.
Yeah, the ones that stand out the most in that range for me, and Hilton at 6,200, I do have interest in on a list
Me
of like
too.
7 guys right now that are like tier 1 options for me early. Just want to look more into the matchup, but it seems fine against Adore Jackson, LaShawn Sims. In the 5K range, the 2 that'll stand out for me, Tyler Boyd, 1 with Andy Dalton back. We finally saw Boyd have a nice week last week, made up like 70% of Ryan Finley's passing yards on a couple of nice grabs, touchdown catch. So getting Andy Dalton back, I think will at least help the offense move and sustain drives and reach 200 passing yards for the first time in a month. Tyler Boyd stands out at 5,500. Price somewhat proactively priced up, was around 5K, but I think it's okay in this matchup. We'll have a difficult matchup, though, running out of the slot against Brian Poole at a pick 6 last week. So a little bit hesitant there, but I like him. And then the other priority in that range, if he plays, concussion protocol right now, but Golden Tate. You have Tramon Williams for the Packers in the slot, been very solid this year, only allowing 1 reception per game in man coverage. But they play a lot of zone coverage at times, and that's when the slot wide receivers can get theirs. So Golden Tate, if he is in and healthy, I'll have interest in him. If not, then it becomes just Sterling Shepard in the slot is a really nice value play.
When you look at some of the cheaper guys below 5K, there are a few options to consider here. One guy that I do find interesting, assuming Nick Foles and Shark and Westbrook are popular, Chris Conley. Not exactly a massive deep threat, but since Nick Foles has returned, Conley's seen 17 targets. Right, he's getting a ton of snaps. He's been decent enough. And again, not a big time upside play, but you'd be getting him at 4,500, which is pretty interesting in a game where they have a 25-point total and the near 50 over under. Can he get into the end zone? That's yet to be seen. But sometimes you have to take these risks in large field tournaments. You've got to be different. We saw somebody like A.J. Brown go off for a monster game, and he's been someone that's been held down a lot lately, even though he's got the deep ball upside. So I think there are a couple players to consider here below 5K. Curtis Samuel's been awful lately. He probably won't be owned against Washington. Is it worth it? I don't know. Robbie Anderson coming off a decent game, actually coming off a phenomenal game for his standards. Still only 5 targets, though. Now he's getting Cincinnati. What do you like in the value spot, meaning below 5K?
Yeah, below 5K. You touched on the first one, Chris Conley. I've been rostering this guy every week 1 of the season, and then the other weeks where Nick Foles has been in there. He just has a chemistry. Nick Foles was on record in preseason saying that he loves throwing the ball to Conley. You can take whatever you want from that, but it's been true with the targets. So 4,500, I probably prefer a Conley and Shark stack over getting Westbrook in there. A 5K Westbrook is fine right at that price point, but those Jacksonville receivers stand out. Hopefully they don't pick up as much ownership, but Conley should stay low. And then all the way down at 4K flat, a tough matchup against the Indy zone, but Corey Davis is getting too cheap to ignore, in my opinion. I mean, he's touching $3,000. We'll see what the snaps look like in general, but even if you told me he's going to play 70% of the snaps at 4K, I like that. I guess the big thing to point out is he's 4K. Greg Ward came off of the practice squad for the Eagles last week, caught like 3 or 4 balls. He's more expensive than Corey Davis this week against Miami. I'm not sure I agree with that, so I like Corey Davis at 4K flat. 2 more names to just slightly touch on in the range, no priority, but Hunter Renfrow at 43 in a nice matchup against KC. Fuller in the slot is a nice spot to pick on. Mike Williams is a big play upside, a guy who probably does not see much of Chris Harris. We'll see, though. This is a big if. Chris Harris hasn't moved a ton into the slot. We saw him move Chris Harris Jr. against Devontae Adams into the slot. So I think that you can see it happen again against Keenan Allen. We saw some of it earlier this year. So not a spot that I'm really too enamored by getting to Mike Williams, but he's at least in play. And I'll just echo Sterling Shepard at 4,900. If there is no Golden Tate with a concussion, he'll move into the slot where just in his career and into college, he was much better of a receiver. And that's a really nice spot to have Daniel Jones throwing the ball to. And
all right, want to close it out with a tight end position that's just been god-awful all season long?
Yeah, let's do it. This is the week where there's no buys, so we actually have some decent names there. Good names.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, Travis Kelce against Oakland. That's a pricey salary, though. Zach Ertz against Miami. Will they at that salary, man? 6,700 on Ertz is actually, to me, quite terrifying. We might have different opinions here. George Kittle against Baltimore. Oof. I love this guy. Last game basically playing on a broken ankle. He's unreal. Love me some George Kittle, but 6,100 against the Baltimore defense that is just shutting literally every team down that they face, including Tom Brady's Patriots. Hunter Henry against Denver. So I think you see what I'm getting at here. Mark Andrews against San Francisco. The theme is a lot of these guys either have really shitty matchups or really expensive price tags. How are we approaching the 5K and up range? I'll throw Evan Ingram in if he plays 5,200 against Green Bay, and Darren Waller, who's fallen off a cliff against Kansas City at 5,500.
Yeah, so I really like the 5K range there. I like Hunter Henry. Matchup against Denver, I think, is fine for him. He's probably the guy that stands out the most to me. And then Evan Ingram. If Ingram plays and we get news on him just practicing this week, he'll jump Hunter Henry and probably be, to me, the best overall play on the slate at tight end. If you look at the Packers, they've just ran bad with Evan Ingram now, if he does play, facing every probably top 8 tight end this season. But even other guys like Greg Olsen have just had a ton of success. They continue to not be able to cover tight ends. They don't have the personnel to do it. They've been getting injured in their secondary, Darnell Savage, which has hurt them, but also just they can't cover crossing routes for tight ends. So Evan Ingram will be my favorite tight end play this week. If he is indeed healthy, we get news about him practicing. And then Hunter Henry right there at that range. You touched on it. Ertz, I think, is a little bit too expensive at
Green Bay allowing the third most fantasy points to tight ends, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So that just echoes that. Ertz at 6,700. I just prefer Goddard for a lot cheaper in a spot where, Ertz probably has just more upside, but Goddard's seeing red zone targets on the field just as much. It's a spot that if Ertz goes out and does what he did last week, a lot of it in garbage time, 30-plus points, then sure, you need it. But I think more times than not, you're hovering around 15 points. Similar things can be said for Travis Kelce. It's going to cost you to play the KC stack. I like Mahomes. You probably have to just get in. We didn't touch on him, but Sammy Watkins at a cheaper price point, and then pick between your Tyreek Hill's and Kelsey's. Not a priority at that price tag for me, Kelsey. If he has his 35-point ceiling game, so be it. But yeah, it's really the 5K range. And then punting tight ends, I think Eric Ebron just quit on the team is what I'm seeing. Just a business decision, they said, for him not to play the rest of the season. So Jack Doyle at 3,300 definitely stands out. And David Njoku, if he returns, tough matchup, 3,500 though. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, what in the world is going on with Eric Ebron?
Yeah, I don't know. I try to look into it more, but it just seems like it's something to do with contract issues and just saying that he doesn't want to play anymore.
That's crazy. It's not like he's playing on an 0-11 team either.
Yeah, I mean, he went to Frank Wright and said, I want to be used more. And then he got like 12 targets, dropped the touchdown that turned into an interception. And then the following week, he starts throwing up in a garbage can and only sees like 4 targets. And now this is the storyline of it. And now he just doesn't want to play. So maybe just motivation, losing interest.
It's wild, man. I agree with you on Sterling Shepard for sure. And let's not forget that, if Golden Tate is out, it's only going to help Evan Ingram. Golden Tate's been one of the preferred targets, as he should be, of Daniel Jones. By the way, you know what I was thinking today that really pissed me off, Sal? I'm going to tell you. I want your opinion on it. You're a smart football mind. So the Eagles trade away. Yeah, I'm going Homer here for a second. Just buckle up, fellas. So the Eagles trade a 3rd-round pick for Golden Tate to rent him for less than half a season. Mike Groh, offensive coordinator for the Eagles, says, we don't really know how to integrate. It's difficult to integrate him in the offense. Essentially admitted that I don't know how to use this guy. Stupid. So he does nothing over 8 games. He had a big touchdown reception in the Chicago game, but that's about it in the playoffs. Nothing else. Horrible season. No fault of his own, in my opinion. He's a guy that averages 90-plus receptions, 1,000-plus yards every year with Matthew Stafford. Should be able to do it with either Carson Wentz or Nick Foles. Now he's in New York with a subpar rookie quarterback. And he's got 80-plus yards in 4 of 7 games. He has 4 touchdowns. And he's gone up against teams the likes of Chicago, New England, Minnesota, Dallas, New York Jets, all teams that have at least respectable to very, very elite pass defenses. How is it possible that you can fail to implement somebody of his caliber so badly that he can go to New York with a rookie quarterback and an overall garbage team and put up very solid numbers at the position? I don't get it, Sal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it either. You see him, it's obviously like Golden Tate's ability to get separation right now when Daniel Jones, although he's been fine targeting the outside, just very much relies on him. And every time you see Golden Tate catching a ball, he's just wide open, getting open. So he has never been an issue like the last 3 or 4 years. And he's getting older and he's up there and he's coming off suspension, but for this year at least, but he's proven everybody wrong, at least including myself. I think it's an issue where last year, was there issues around rotating players in with like Aguilar and things like that? Or like I know that they say like they couldn't implement him, but I remember reading last year at least like issues around rotating him in terms of getting him enough snaps, and then like just the latter part of the year just made it so he just didn't get in as much.
For sure. But what I'm saying is there shouldn't have been that issue.
Oh yeah, I mean yeah, you look at it right now, it's just the both of whether it's between Aguilar and him. Just looking at that, it's tough. But like the only thing I could think of is they use just such heavy 12 personnel. So you rarely had slot receivers on the field. And when you did, they were just giving Aguilar the ball more, which right now seems like a big mistake.
Right.
Or at least giving him the snaps more.
Right. Yeah, no, it's crazy. But think of this too, by the way, and then we'll close it out. If that was the case, why did you give away a 3rd-round pick for him? Like, did you not, was there no foresight there at all?
Yeah, that's also, yeah, that's great to bring up. Like, that's the biggest point of it. It's not like you picked up this guy off the street because he was waived and you just wanted to try it out and see if it worked. Like, there was meetings around, okay, we're going to get this guy. We're giving up capital for him. And then you did nothing. So it's, I mean, that's just bad management.
Was there never a discussion of how will we use him? You know, it's
exactly.
It makes you believe there was no communication between the front office and the coaching. That's what I think. But, and also Mike Groh just sucks, but let's close it out with tight ends here. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Man, it's at that part of the season where you got football, basketball, so much going on. The holidays coming up, so all you hanging out with us on a Tuesday is appreciated. Hit that thumbs up button if you haven't done so yet. That's even more so appreciated. It helps us keep doing what we're doing for free. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. Below the 5K range, there's some comments in chat right now. Flame emojis next to Ryan Griffin. Your thoughts on him? 8 targets over the last 2 games, just happens to be doing stuff with them. We'll see if that continues. Greg Olson against Washington. Gerald Everett against Arizona. Like you said, no Eric Ebron. You mentioned Doyle. So, and I agree with you on Jack Doyle for sure. Anybody else that we haven't talked about that you think deserves some recognition here? Oh, and by the way, Vance McDonald, whenever you got a chalky tight end like that, with a floor of 0, just play somebody else that might also have a floor of 0 and the same ceiling, because that's what happens. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Vance McDonald, echo those same concerns. This week, you're probably going to have Jack Doyle being that chalky guy at tight end, just due to the fact that he's going to take on a 70+% role.
I think he's a markedly better play than Vance McDonald, though.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing. In his offense, he's just more of a priority in that offense, especially around the red zone. So yeah, Doyle at 3,300. If he starts to become 25% owned, it's just the same thing for me. And the guy that I don't prioritize, like you've seen with Gesicki and Vance McDonald the last couple of weeks. The Ryan Griffin thing, I'm really not much on that. I know that he's been doing well in terms of finding the end zone, but you look at it, the majority of his games where he scores double-digit points, 3 of them, he does it on just 4 or less targets. He finds the end zone. One of those games, 2 touchdowns to score his ceiling 24-point game. The only good game where you saw volume out of him, he caught 6 for 50 yards, 11-point performance. That's okay, but he's priced up to 4,300 for a guy. If he doesn't score a touchdown, probably get you like 4 or 5 fantasy points. So he's a guy that, similar to the last 2 weeks, and it burned me 2 weeks ago, but not a guy that I'll probably have much of at all. The price point's just coming up to a spot where all the 3K tight ends, I believe, have just similar projections to him, ceilings, floors, all of it, but they're like $1,000 cheaper. So you could say the same about all these other guys. Goddard, I think, is fine at 41. Gesicki at 36, first career touchdown after playing the most snaps the week before. So his role in this offense is definitely shooting upwards, but again, it's touchdown dependent. So yeah, for me, it's the 5K range. I think it's Ingram above all of these guys if he actually suits up at 52. I really don't even care what the ownership is at that point. And then if Njoku and Jack Doyle stand out, the rest of those guys that the chat was mentioning and just in the 3K range, they're just small percentages of each as punt tight ends if you want to get them into your lineups.
It's very early on in the week, but I'm going to ask you this to close out the show. Right now, your top 2 plays at each position, Sal.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll start at the quarterback position. At quarterback, I'll take it as an approach to tournaments.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'll
Cash
go with...
is a lot easier to decipher anyway, so, you know.
Yeah. So for tournaments, I'll say the top 2 plays that I want to get to at quarterback are going to be Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff, with Nick Foles being a close third. Going to running back now. Tournament plays, I'll go with Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley. Wide receiver, I'm just going through these pages. Devontae Adams at wide receiver and DJ Shark, and then tight end Evan Ingram and Jack Doyle.
Okay.
I'll go Evan Ingram and Hunter Henry.
Okay, I'll go Patrick Mahomes and Nick Foles, but from a tournament standpoint, I think you could be different with Jameis Winston. Running back, this is tough because in tournaments, I think Jacobs and Aaron Jones could be really appealing if the ownership comes in super low. But right now, Le'Veon Bell would be one of those guys that I feel pretty locked in with. Christian McCaffrey, if you can get there, you always know what you're going to get. Wide receiver, tournaments, again, low ownership. If it's there, Tyreek Hill. Devontae Adams, clearly. DJ Shark, clearly. And then as a value guy, Chris Conley, we both liked him. Tight end, yeah, Evan Ingram if he plays. I'm with you on there. I think your analysis was spot on. And then Doyle's cheap enough to where I talked a lot of shit on Vance McDonald last week. But that's also, Mason Rudolph was benched because he's so bad, and no one was surprised that happened, right? Like, nobody was surprised that happened. Indy's still running the ball, even without Marlon Mack. But it's certainly a different spot here, Sal, where you have a team that isn't afraid to throw to their tight ends. It's just that they've been using two of them. So when you combine the tight end targets that we've seen this season, there should be more than enough to go around and we can close it out with this because I think it's a good conversation. There should be more than enough to go around for Jack Doyle, given that just take a look at these targets. 9 combined targets, then the week before only 4, then 16, 6, 9, 10, 7, 13, 8, 7, 5. You know what? That's not including Mo Alley Cox. So, give like 1 or 2 to him each week. Is it crazy to think that Jack Doyle sees, 8 or 9 targets this week? No, it's not.
Yeah, it's not crazy. And like, he's at just such a cheap price point. Like, if this news on Ebron, I think it came out yesterday or yesterday morning, if it came out 3 days ago, Doyle would probably be around 4,000, 4,100.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He's going to be owned, but at 3,300, it seems fine. Yeah, if I had to guess where it's going to come in at, I'd say somewhere between 6 to 8 targets for Doyle. You probably see 1 to 2 red zone targets, and you're not going to find anything better in the whole entire 3K range at tight end.
Well, that's the biggest thing. Eric Ebron leads the entire team, not including running backs, in red zone targets this year. He's got 11 red zone targets through 11 games. Doyle with 7. You're going to see some of those filtered over to Doyle, so I like it. Sal, have a great Thanksgiving, man. I probably won't speak with you until then. We will see you guys as the viewers. We'll see you tomorrow. Myself and Chris Spags will be on the deeper dive tonight. Me and Adam Scherer and myself. I'll be with you up until Thanksgiving. Tell everybody where they can find you, man.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SalVetri_DFS. I'll be back here on Awesemo because of the holidays on Saturday at 11 a.m., closing out the week with Chris Randone. And then I have a YouTube channel. It's just Sal Vetri if you want to support over there, more fantasy content. But yeah, everybody have a great, happy, healthy, and safe holiday.
All right. And don't be an asshole and stop talking to family members because they have different political beliefs as you. You only got one family. It's my wise words for the day. Devlin Hodges, by the way, officially starting for the Steelers. Good luck, everyone, tonight and this weekend. We'll catch you back here tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports.